Welcome to Dark Whispers. The mountains of Appalachia have always carried stories, whispers that drift through the timberline, rumors of cabins long since swallowed by moss and time. But some places aren't forgotten because they were abandoned. They're forgotten because something wanted them that way. The locals know this. They won't hike certain ridges after dusk, won't approach any structure with boarded windows and a chimney that still smells faintly of cold ashes. And they never, ever touch a cabin that appears suddenly where it wasn't the year before. My name is Aaron McCall, and this is the beginning of 8 true horrors my team encountered while documenting abandoned structures across the Appalachian backcountry. What began as a historical preservation project slowly warped into something far darker, something patient, hungry, and old. It started on the 3rd day of our trek. We had reached Black Hollow, a steep valley suffocated by towering firs. Our guide, an old mountain man named Dalton Price, warned us that the hollow had bad bones, his words, not mine. The air here felt denser, colder, as if something inhaled when you entered. Still, our team pushed forward, 3 explorers with cameras, maps, and an excitement that would soon drain from our faces. The first cabin appeared around dusk. It leaned like a drunk against a tree line, its roof sagging and its doorway crooked. Thick vines wound around the porch supports, as if trying to pull the whole thing back into the earth. But it wasn't the structure that made us stop. It was the sound. Someone was knocking from the inside. Slow, rhythmic, like a person trapped in a coffin trying to get out. Dalton froze, his lantern trembling slightly. "We're not alone in there," he whispered. "But it ain't someone you want to meet." We thought it was an animal, a raccoon, maybe even an injured hiker. Anything human, anything normal. But when we approached, the knocking stopped, and then something else started. A dragging sound. Heavy, wet, sliding across old wood. The lantern's glow barely reached the windows, but in the faint reflection I saw movement. Not a clear shape, not a person, just a shifting smear, like a shadow trying to form a body but failing. The boards on the door pulsed outward for a moment, as if something pushed against them from within. Dalton pulled us back. "This cabin belonged to the Crowther family," he muttered. "Back in the 1940s. They went missing without a trace. Folks say they never left, not really." While Dalton argued we should leave before full dark, I lifted my camera to document the structure. The instant the shutter clicked, the knocking resumed. Harder, faster, almost frantic. A deep voice, muffled and distorted, echoed through the wood. "Let us out!" The voice wasn't singular. It was layered. Several tones fused into one trembling groan. We stepped back, but the cabin reacted. The boards on the window frames began to bend outward, creaking like old ribs. Something was pressing its face, or something like a face, against the gaps. I caught a glimpse through the crack. 2 eyes, black, liquid, and reflecting light like an animal's. But they blinked, slowly, too slowly. Dalton grabbed my shoulder. "We leave. Now." We retreated down the slope, but even from a distance we could hear the knocking chasing us. Each hit stronger, louder, until it felt like the cabin wanted to tear itself apart to reach us. When we finally reached the old logging road, everything went silent. The woods around us became suffocatingly still. And then the knocking resumed, but this time it came from a different direction. Up ahead, where there shouldn't have been any cabin. Dalton's voice cracked. It moved. Lord help us, it moved. We didn't camp that night. No one slept. Every few minutes someone swore they heard tapping in the woods, sometimes close, sometimes impossibly far. The cabin didn't follow us physically, but something inside it did, and that was only the first encounter. What waited in the next cabin was far worse. By morning, the forest seemed calmer, but none of us trusted the silence. Even the birds avoided Black Hollow's borders. Dalton insisted we keep moving. "Cabins ain't supposed to move," he muttered. "So if one does, you don't stay put long enough to see where it wants to go." We pushed deeper into the ridge until the trees thinned around a clearing. A second cabin sat in the middle, perfectly intact despite being over a century old. Unlike the first, this one looked lived in. The windows weren't shattered, the wooden steps weren't rotting, and the front door hung neatly on its frame. It stood there as if waiting for company. A rusted plaque near the entrance read, Hartman Cabin, 1911. A faint trail of footprints, bare, small, and dozens of them, circled the clearing, weaving in and out like children playing tag. But the dirt was undisturbed by wind or rain. Dalton's face paled. Those footprints weren't here 2 weeks ago, he whispered. Someone or something made them last night. We exchanged a nervous glance. Still, the historian instinct in us pushed forward. We needed documentation. Answers. Proof. Inside, the air smelled like lavender soap and cold iron. Dust clung to every surface except the floor. The floor was spotless, as if someone swept it moments before we arrived. A rocking chair sat in the corner, swaying gently, too gently for the airless room. Probably a draft, Melanie said, trying to reassure herself more than us. But there was no draft, no open window, no movement except the chair rocking back and forth. Faster now. I approached slowly. The closer I got, the colder the air became. My breath fogged. When I touched the back of the rocking chair, it stopped instantly, like someone had been sitting in it and only just stood up. Dalton hissed sharply, Don't touch nothing in here. These places remember. Melanie wandered deeper into the cabin, flashlights sweeping over pictures on the wall. Faded photos of a man, a woman, and 2 children. The glass covering the frames was cracked from the inside, as though tiny fists had struck them repeatedly. She shivered. Something terrible happened here. Then we heard it. Laughter. Children's laughter. Not outside. Not distant. Inside the room with us. The sound bounced off the walls, playful yet hollow. 2 small shadows darted across the floor. Quick, black shapes moving too fast to be footsteps, but too defined to be tricks of light. Melanie screamed as tiny cold fingers brushed her hand. Dalton reacted instantly. Out! Now! We bolted toward the door, but it slammed shut in our faces with a violent crack. I grabbed the handle. It wouldn't budge. Something on the other side pressed back, giggling. Then came the whispering, dozens of soft voices layering over each other. Stay play, stay play. The floorboards creaked behind us. When we turned, the rocking chair was moving again, violently, like invisible hands were shoving it back and forth. Melanie backed into a wall, her camera shaking in her grip. What do you want from us? The answer came from the hallway, whispered by a voice too small and too broken to belong to a living child. Trade. Just then, the door burst open by itself, slamming so hard against the wall that dust rained from the rafters. Dalton didn't hesitate. He grabbed each of us and shoved us into the clearing. The instant we crossed the doorway, the laughter stopped. The cabin went dead, completely still. But as we staggered across the grass, something tapped on the window behind us. We turned just long enough to see 4 shapes, small, pale, and watching. Their eyes gleamed wetly, reflecting the daylight, even though they stood in shadow. And then they vanished. The window emptied as if nothing was ever there. Dalton didn't speak for nearly an hour as we trekked uphill. Finally he stopped, wiping sweat from his brow. That cabin... Folks say the Hartman kids froze to death after getting locked inside during a storm. People tried to rescue them, but the door wouldn't open. When they found the bodies, the children's hands were bloody. They tore at the door with their fingernails. Melanie muttered. And now they want someone else to stay inside with them. Dalton didn't argue. We set camp far from the clearing, but nighttime brought no relief. The laughter returned. Soft at first, then circling the camp like children running in a ring. Shadows darted between the trees. A small handprint appeared on Melanie's tent from the outside, smearing down slowly as if something dragged its fingers across the fabric. We slept in shifts, if you could call lying awake, terrified, sleep. At dawn we couldn't pack fast enough. But the mountains weren't done with us. A 3rd cabin waited ahead, and unlike the others, this one wasn't abandoned. Not anymore. The 3rd cabin rose from a dense copse of oaks and maples like a beast stirring from slumber. Unlike the first 2, this one was not decrepit. Its boards were polished, Windows gleaming even though no light shone inside, and a faint plume of smoke curled from the chimney, dissipating into the overcast sky. The smell hit us first, burning pine and something foul beneath it, a coppery tang that made my stomach churn. Dalton halted immediately, his face pale. "That cabin ain't been on any map for 50 years, he said. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "It only appears when it wants company." We approached cautiously, cameras raised. The air grew thicker with every step, dragging at our lungs like water. A low humming echoed from within, vibrating the ground slightly. It wasn't music, exactly. Not a song you could remember. More like a vibration. A pulse, a heartbeat from the cabin itself. The door swung open before we touched it. "Come in," a voice called. Smooth, polite, but cold. Dalton froze. Do not go in," he hissed. But curiosity and horror pulled us forward. The floorboards creaked under our weight, and the smell intensified. Inside, the cabin was immaculate, impossibly clean. A long table ran down the center, set for a family meal. Plates of food steaming, silverware arranged neatly, a roast in the middle that looked alive. Movement beneath the golden crust. Tiny legs, wriggling. Melanie recoiled. What is that?" Before anyone could answer, the chairs around the table slid outward, as if invisible guests had just risen. The humming deepened, vibrating our bones. Then, from the corner, a small girl emerged. Pale, almost translucent, with eyes too large and black, void-like. She smiled and tilted her head. "You'll stay for dinner?" Dalton grabbed my arm. "Run. Now." But the door slammed shut again. The cabin was alive, and it had no intention of letting us leave easily. The walls seemed to breathe, pulsing slowly, expanding and contracting. Shadows slithered across the ceiling, forming shapes that mocked familiar people. Some faces from our childhoods, others from photographs we didn't recognize but somehow remembered. Then came the whispers. Hundreds of voices, overlapping in layers, speaking all at once. "Sit, eat, join us, never leave." The girl moved toward us, unnaturally fast, feet not quite touching the floor. The food on the table writhed, as if eager to crawl toward us. I felt fingers brush my neck. Cold, long, skeletal fingers. Dalton shoved us backward, trying to force the door open. It wouldn't budge. The walls started tightening, closing and imperceptibly. The humming had turned into a chant now, deep and reverberating, pressing on our minds. "Stay, stay, stay." I looked at Melanie. She was frozen, eyes wide, staring at the girl who now grinned impossibly, exposing teeth too many, too sharp. Suddenly, the food leapt from the table, airborne like snakes striking. Plates shattered, silverware clanged like metallic screams, and the roast, alive, writhing, sprang toward Dalton. He barely dodged, shouting at us to move. I felt a tug at my ankle. Something cold and sticky wrapped around it. I screamed, falling to the floor. In the dim light, I saw dozens of tiny hands emerging from the floorboards, clawing, trying to pull me in. Dalton kicked violently at the cabin walls, breaking one of the floorboards. A shadow lunged from the opening beneath, eyes blazing with hunger. I grabbed Melanie, pulling her with me as Dalton cleared a path to the door. We burst out of the cabin into the cold, gray morning. The hum stopped abruptly. The door banged behind us, slamming shut so hard it shook the ground. We didn't look back. None of us dared. Dalton whispered, trembling, That one collects souls. That's why it appears it wants new playmates." The forest seemed to close in around us. Even birds kept their distance. Every step felt watched. Every rustle of leaves sounded like whispers. By the time we reached a ridge overlooking the next valley, fatigue had set in. Our cameras were broken, lenses cracked, batteries drained, but somehow the footage remained intact, blurry, distorted, but enough to show the horrors within. Dalton studied the map. 2 more cabins. And the 4th one, that one doesn't just scare you. It waits, patiently, for hours, days, maybe years until it thinks you're ready. I swallowed hard. The thought of more cabins, more horrors, was unbearable. But we had come too far. There was no turning back. The fourth cabin lay beyond the ridge, hidden by a sheer cliff and mist that smelled faintly of decay. From here, it looked like a charred skeleton of a house, blackened with twisted roof caved in. But as we drew closer, the mist thinned and revealed the cabin whole, miraculously intact. Yet something about it radiated pure malevolence. We camped that night at the ridge's edge, listening to the wind moan through the trees. The fourth cabin never left our minds. And none of us slept, because when you've seen 3 cursed cabins in Appalachia, you realize one terrifying truth. The mountains themselves are alive, and they hunger. The fourth cabin waited like a predator, shrouded in mist and shadow. Its roof sagged, warped with age, and the blackened timbers creaked as if breathing. Unlike the first 3, there was no inviting glow, no lingering smoke, only an oppressive silence that seemed to press against her skin, demanding attention. Dalton refused to speak much as we approached, but his tense grip on my shoulder said enough. This one was different. The path leading to it wound through a hollow choked with dead trees. Every step we took felt heavier, like we were walking underwater. Our flashlights barely cut through the gray fog, revealing glimpses of twisted roots and skeletal branches that seemed to twist toward us, beckoning. When we finally reached the cabin, the door was gone. Nothing but a black void gaped at us, revealing the interior as pure darkness. And yet we could hear it, a slow, deliberate scratching from within, like fingernails dragged across wood. Dalton whispered, "Once you step inside, it doesn't let go. Some never leave." Against our better judgment, we crossed the threshold. Instantly, the air grew icy. My breath came out in clouds. The floorboards were slick, almost liquid, and each step produced ripples, as if we were walking on water. The darkness inside was complete, thick, tactile, suffocating. And then we saw them, shapes, dozens of them, hanging from the ceiling and walls. Not bodies exactly, but twisted humanoid forms, bound by black rope, suspended mid-motion. Faces frozen in silent screams. Their eyes, hollow and wet, tracked us as we moved. A low voice slithered from the shadows. "You shouldn't have come here." We froze. The sound wasn't coming from one place. It came from everywhere, surrounding us, vibrating through our bones. Melanie stepped forward, her flashlight shaking. The beam landed on a corner of the room and revealed a small child standing perfectly still. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and the skin seemed pale and translucent. Black veins ran across its face like a map of something terrible. The child raised a finger slowly, pointing at each of us in turn, then at the ceiling. The ropes holding the hanging figures began to tighten. The suspended forms started to sway violently, and the scratching became a high-pitched wail. The floor beneath us rippled again, this time faster, and shadows spilled out from the corners of the cabin like black water, coiling around our feet. Dalton screamed, "Run!" We bolted, but the darkness fought back. Shadows surged up the walls and reached for us. My arms were grabbed by unseen hands, dragging me toward the center of the room. I felt the child's cold fingers press against my chest, pinning me in place. My vision blurred. Whispers filled my head. Stay forever." Melanie yanked me free, and we crashed toward the exit. Except there was no exit. The walls had shifted. Doors, windows, and walls had all merged into one seamless black surface. Panic overtook us. Dalton pounded on the walls, shouting, "It's not real! It's not real!" But the air was heavy, alive, and breathing with malevolent intelligence. Then came the scent of decay, sharp and sweet, filling my nostrils. I turned to see one of the hanging figures detached from the ceiling, dropping like a puppet with its strings cut. It slid across the floor toward us, its mouth opening impossibly wide, emitting a sound like grinding metal. In desperation, Dalton grabbed a fallen branch and swung at the creature. The figure evaporated into mist. We ran blindly, guided only by instinct. Shadows lashed at our legs and faces, clawing, whispering, promising that if we fell, we would never leave. Somehow, we stumbled through the cabin into the night. The mist had lifted, and the fourth cabin now sat quietly in the clearing, as if asleep. But we knew better. Dalton swore it had followed us with its gaze, even across the distance. We didn't speak on the way down the ridge. Even the forest seemed subdued, holding its breath. Only the occasional rustle of dead leaves reminded us we were not alone. That night, when we camped in a small hollow far from the cabins, none of us could sleep. Every shadow seemed to stretch longer. Every wind gust carried whispers of the fourth cabin's interior, replaying images of twisting bodies, Blackwater, and the pale child with veins like maps of the dead. Dalton finally broke the silence. The last cabin, the fifth one, it's not just a structure, it's a gateway. Every cabin we've seen is a layer, a test. The fifth, it's where the mountain claims what it's owed. People disappear there and are never seen again. Those who survive, he swallowed hard. They don't leave the mountains unchanged. We stared at him, realizing the truth. This expedition, begun with cameras and curiosity, had become a hunt for survival, and the fifth cabin awaited, hidden somewhere beyond the next ridge, in the densest, darkest part of Appalachia. By dawn, we began the ascent. Our cameras were damaged, batteries drained, and our minds frayed. Every step was a struggle against the memories of the fourth cabin. The faces, the whispers, the shadows that clawed at us. We had seen horrors that defied explanation, yet the mountains held one final secret, one ultimate horror, waiting at the end of this trail. We didn't know what awaited inside the fifth cabin, only that once you enter, the mountain decides whether you leave. And we had no choice but to find out. The fifth cabin wasn't on any map. It wasn't visible from the ridges or valleys we had crossed. We only found it because the mist itself seemed to pull us there, curling around our legs, guiding us down a hidden trail that shouldn't have existed. Every step toward it felt like wading through a dream, thick and unreal, yet the weight of dread was tangible, pressing on our shoulders and hearts. When we emerged from the fog, the cabin stood in a clearing so quiet, so impossibly still, that the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Its walls were blackened wood, covered in carvings of faces and hands, etched deep into the surface. The windows were mirrors, reflecting our fear back at us. No smoke, no warmth, just the cabin, waiting. Dalton turned to us, his face pale and drawn. Once you go in, it chooses who leaves and who stays. Every cabin before this was a warning, a test. This one decides. The door groaned open before we could touch it, and a gust of cold air poured out, carrying whispers from the mountain itself. Come, stay belong. Inside, the floorboards were blackened, slick, and uneven like hardened tar. Shadows pooled in corners, moving independently, crawling toward us. A long hallway stretched ahead, lined with doors. Each door whispered our names, inviting, threatening, beckoning. The farther we walked, the louder the whispers became, layering over one another in maddening chorus. A door on the left creaked open, revealing a room lit by a faint, sickly glow. Inside, figures from the previous cabins, twisted, pale and still, sat frozen around a table, staring at us with hollow eyes. One of the Hartman children from the second cabin floated near the ceiling, smiling coldly. A low humming began, vibrating the air. Suddenly, the door slammed behind us. Shadows surged in the corners, wrapping around our legs, pulling, tugging. We screamed, struggling against the black, sticky grasp. Dalton shouted, "Keep moving. Don't stop." We sprinted down the hall, doors slamming open and shut on their own, revealing glimpses of horrors too vast to comprehend. Rooms full of eyes, ceilings dripping with black fluid, walls that breathed and twisted as if alive. Each step was a battle, as the cabin seemed determined to claim us. At the end of the hallway, we saw it, a massive archway carved from the mountainside itself, black stone etched with glowing runes. From it came a pulsing light, warm and inviting, yet lined with shadows that reached outward like fingers. Dalton whispered, "This is it, the mountain's heart." We didn't hesitate. With a final glance back at the horrors of the fifth cabin, the suspended figures, the pale children, the shadows writhing and screaming, we ran through the archway. The world shifted. The cold, oppressive cabin vanished. We stumbled into daylight, back on the ridge above the valley. The mist was gone, the forest quiet. Birds sang. The sun touched our faces for the first time in what felt like weeks. But none of us were untouched. Dalton's hand shook. Melanie's eyes were wide with a terror that would never fade, and I could feel in my bones. The mountain had followed us, a whisper at the edge of perception, a promise that it wasn't finished. We tried to leave. We tried to return to civilization. Yet at night, when the wind howled through our homes and the shadows stretched unnaturally, we could hear the faintest knock, slow, deliberate, patient. Every cabin had left a mark on us, a reminder that the mountains remember. They remember who entered, who saw, who survived, and they wait for those foolish enough to return. Years later, I still see them in my dreams. The first cabin's knocking, the Hartman children's laughter, the translucent girl with teeth too many, the writhing figures of the fourth cabin. And the fifth waits in the dark, always waiting. Some nights, I swear I can hear calling me back, whispering in the edges of my mind, "Come stay, belong." And I know without doubt that if I ever set foot in Appalachia again, the cabins will find me. Because in these mountains, abandoned cabins aren't just old structures. They're sentient traps, patient and eternal. They remember every visitor, every scream, every soul. And one day, they will call again. The mountains are watching. Always. End the cabins of dread. 8 true horrors from abandoned Appalachia.